The View's Meghan McCain was not pleased with Senators Mazie Hirono and Tammy Duckworth, who have been vowing to vote against Biden's non-diverse nominees because they have cited a lack of Asian and Pacific Islander representation in his nominations and appointments. Now, later they decided to drop their objections because the Biden administration appointed a senior level liaison who happens to be Asian. It's very few details have been given about that, but that is the underlying story that fueled the frustration that Meghan McCain is about to share with you in this next clip. Take a look.
We're going to a place where even if people need money, even if people are qualified to get into Ivy Leagues, race and gender is more important than your skill qualifications, the content of your character. It is not what Martin Luther King Jr. preached. I think this is a very, very slippery slope. I was very surprised to hear someone like Tammy Duckworth say something like this. She got a lot of blowback from a lot of people, not just on the right. And I think this is actually just the natural progression of identity politics. And I will say, just to put a cap on this, The View is 25 years old next year. We've only had one Asian American co-host this show. So does that mean that one of us should be leaving at some point because there's not enough representation? We're talking about, is identity politics more important than qualifications of a job? And I think that's a question going forward that the progressive left is going to have to reconcile.
I mean, we can reconcile it right now in the very specific example that she wants people to chime in on, which is like, first of all, okay, let's talk about the identity politics thing second. But first, let's just focus on the fact that she's a person who had no qualifications to do what she's doing right now and got the position based on her identity. In fact, the whole point of that show is to have women with different identities chime in and share their views on what the news of the day is. Like, that's the whole point of the show. And she is the heel of that show who unwittingly serves that role of saying incredibly ignorant things at times, and people watch it because they love to hate her. Like, that's a big part of that program. But we do have a poll on this and we want to know, let's put it up because I don't know exactly what the wording is, but is Meghan McCain really qualified to be on The View? Like, let's answer that question for her. Is Meghan McCain qualified to host The View? Yes or no, super simple poll there. Go to tyt.com/polls/McCain to vote in on that. But yeah, so there's the Meghan McCain part of this, which is she's not the best messenger when it comes to this issue because she's not qualified, in my opinion, to do what she's doing. She's the daughter of a late senator. That's why she's doing what she's doing. But I do think that there's an issue with what Tammy Duckworth and Mazie Hirono were doing. They've backed off since because there was some small concession. But I've been talking too much, Nando. I want to know what you think, and I'll share my thoughts about them.
I think you touched on it a little bit that actually, I mean, if I were voting in the poll, I would vote yes, because Meghan McCain is uniquely qualified to be on The View. She pisses everyone off all the time, and that is part of her job. She probably doesn't understand it, but that only makes it better. She makes her better at the job because her shocking lack of self-awareness and her just unbelievable self-centeredness, which like any political issue is just about like, how does this affect me? Is actually catnip for that show, because I don't know, the only time I ever hear about The View is when she says something like absolutely just revolting and with shocking lack of self-awareness. Therefore, I'm paying attention to The View. Therefore, she's servicing a function that is good for the producers of The View. So the fact that she's like one of the dumbest people alive and just utterly revolting in every way, and the fact that she got the job because she had a famous father, and that's the only reason why she's anywhere she is precisely perfect for that job in a way, because it pisses everyone off. Like, no one is a Meghan McCain fan. You're right. She's the heel, and that is great. If you have a show where everyone's great, like Jacobin Weekends, you're gonna have a passionate and small committed audience. But to get like a mass audience, like on The View, you need to have the bad guys. You need to have the heel. And Meghan McCain serves that role perfectly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. But based on her definition, right? Because this is where the delusional part comes in. Based on her definition of how people should be hired for that show, she's under the assumption that she got that job because she's qualified.
Open casting call. Yeah, like imagine if Meghan McCain had to compete in an open casting call with just knowing nothing about a person's background. Yeah, she would be near the bottom of that list.
Nando, she did not want to read about drone strikes when she was hosting Take Part Live, and the producer was begging her we're about to do a story on this. Please just read the talking points I have prepared for you. Like, I'm telling you this because based on her own definition of what should qualify you, she's not qualified. But yes, I mean, she's there for a very specific reason. We'd never talk about The View if it weren't for Meghan McCain. So that's definitely a factor into why she's there in the first place, in addition to the fact that she has a famous political family and late father. But I do want to also touch on what I think is valid criticism toward Senators Hirono and Duckworth, because understand what they were saying was, we are not going to vote for white nominees unless we get Asian or Pacific Islander representation within Biden's administration. So they're gonna punish other nominees to make a point to Joe Biden, which I think is strange. And I also think like one of the worst parts of the identity politics isn't that, like, I think representation is great, but can we stop treating people as if they're interchangeable within a given group, right? And we see that with the Biden administration a lot. There's a lot of, it's the first woman. It's the first woman, everybody. First woman who's gonna be Treasury Secretary. Okay, but that Treasury Secretary raked in tens of millions of dollars in like the last 2 years before. This is Janet Yellen, before serving in the administration. Those millions of dollars from speeches that she gave to Wall Street firms that she's now gonna have some power over, in this Treasury Secretary role. I don't care that she's a woman. I would like a woman in that role. That's nice, that's great. I want a woman who's not corrupted by having these close ties with Wall Street. Like, why is it so difficult to understand that? And I feel like if you say it as aggressively as I'm saying it now, you come across as like some bad person who doesn't believe in representation. But representation for representation's sake means nothing. You want representation because the whole point of that is that you're gonna have someone in that position that actually improves people's lives. But based on some of the appointments we've seen and some of the nominees we've seen for Biden's administration, that is not the case. We have all these people who have close ties to the corporate world, and that type of corruption works against us regardless of what your identity is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that the liberal impulse to treat ethnicities, race, gender as these kind of totalizing things, as almost like chips to be traded, like at a bargaining table or something, is just revolting to a lot of people. Like, I think most people feel it in their bones that that's wrong. That it's wrong to tokenize someone that way. It's also just a huge gift to the right. It's just the right kind of smells the hypocrisy in that, and they exploit it very, very well, because liberals treat representation as this utterly superficial thing. And hot tip for the viewers out there: if you're some sort of ethnic minority or a gender, an oppressed gender class or whatever, if you're willing to do the sellout turncoat thing, there is a very lucrative future for you out there. Like, if you're willing to be like the gay black guy who will sell out gay black guys, while professing to speak for them in the ruling class will absorb you willingly and reward you handsomely for that. And that, this kind of what you're describing, liberal identity politics, creates those incentives for people to do that. And there's always gonna be someone that's willing to do it, and that's the extent of their political vision, is find the guy who believes all the things I believe, but just checks the boxes. Like, is he anything other than a white man? Then we're good. And that's just cynical and hypocritical, and people hate it. I think most people hate it, and it's an enormous gift to the right.
And the worst part about all of it is that it gives people this illusion of change when the very people who are supposed to represent that change actually end up doing more to protect and maintain a broken system that we're trying to change to improve the lives of everyone, including disenfranchised groups, people who have been historically and currently discriminated against. Anyway, and again, it's insulting. It's insulting to treat people as if they're interchangeable. Like, the fact that the conversation is just like, oh, we just need Asian appointments. Like, we need Asian. Well, how come there are no Asian appointments? Okay, but okay, that's fine. Yes, okay, there should be more representation. But do you have any suggestions? Like, are the suggestions, do they go beyond just this person checks a box? And I know that those people exist. That's the point that I'm trying to make. It's insulting how all of this stuff gets weaponized, and the end result isn't real change. It isn't real representation, right? It's representation in terms of appearance, but it's not representation in terms of serving the best interests of people, changing a system that's just fundamentally broken.
But it's often even more sinister than that. For example, like Prop 22, which you and I covered extensively for the Jacobin Weekend show, and I'm sure you covered it on TYT as well. The powers that be at Uber and Lyft paid the NAACP millions of dollars to endorse Prop 22 and campaign for it. The National Organization for the Advancement of Colored People just completely bought off by corporate interests and selling Prop 22 as some sort of, anti-racist measure when it wasn't. It's the complete opposite of that. But they use the veneer of that as a way to sell it to the population in Prop 22.1. I'm not saying it was only because of NAACP, but the broad campaign by the corporations was very obvious. And they paid millions and millions and millions of dollars to cover all their tracks, right? I'm sure they influenced media, they had tons of media buys and things like that, but then they also got both the Black organizations and Latino organizations to endorse it. So of course, like if you're the guy who's willing to do that, you're gonna get paid a lot of money. It's just the cynical use of identity politics is not just like inert politically, it's actively harmful because it gives this veneer of progress to reaction, to conservativeness. And it's just
that's such a great point.
It's so obvious.
The veneer is the right terminology. It's right. That's exactly right. I think it's the right way to put it. And for those of you who maybe missed that story or maybe forgot because there's so much news happening simultaneously, Prop 22 is the awful ballot initiative that passed in California that all of these Silicon Valley companies were pushing for to reclassify their employees as like a new classification to avoid paying benefits to these people, right? So Uber drivers, Instacart delivery people, like all of those gig workers now have even less protections than they did before. And the propaganda campaign in favor of Prop 22 was out of control. And the NAACP example you gave is just so important because that's just the perfect example of how that veneer of progress gets implemented. And it's really unfortunate because the end result is workers lose more rights, they lose their health insurance. And now in California, you have cases of people who are getting paid less than minimum wage as a result of Prop 22. So it's just something to keep in mind and keep a close eye on. But the messengers are not people like Meghan McCain. I think it's important to look at not just the person's qualifications, but what they represent substantively in wanting to govern or serve these positions of power in government, if it's just a continuation of what we've been seeing or a further deterioration of the country and workers' rights and all of that, then I'm not interested. I don't care. I don't care if it's a gay person, don't care if it's an Armenian person. Like, I don't care. I want someone who actually represents our best interests so people live lives of dignity. That should be the focus.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.